Ah yes, Kings Dominion and Busch Gardens Williamsburg, the two parks that make up Virginia's coaster paradise. Just think about it. Virginia is an amazing state for coasters. I mean, what other state has an RMC IBox, a B&M Hyper, and an intamin giga? Well, Ohio, but that's kind of besides the point. Anyways, when Parthenon opens, Virginia's coaster collection is just going to get even better. Unlike states like California, who have amazing coasters spanning 4 or more parks, Virginia only has 2, Kings Dominion and BGW. The reason that Virginia has such an amazing coaster collection is simple. It's competition. Because these parks are in such a close proximity to each other, they are forced to compete directly, with each new addition being directly compared to the next. Let's just say for the past couple of years, the Virginia coaster war has been heating up, with each park trying to constantly one-up the other. Additions like Twisted Timbers, I-305, and Parthenon were all attempts to make their respective parks Virginia's premier theme park. Or so we thought. In this video, we're going to take a whole new look at these two parks as we talk about what the future really could hold. So join me as we discuss BGW and Kings Dominion's past, present, and future, as we gain a whole new perspective about what's really happening with the Virginia Coaster War. Now hold up. You may be saying to yourself that I already made this video before, and you'd be right. In fact, this was the video that started it all. Be it with its terrible production quality made on iMovie, it still put a start to this channel. So it only makes sense that this video pays homage to the first one. So without further ado, this is the Virginia Coaster War Revisited. Busch Gardens Williamsburg and Kings Dominion from the beginning were competitors. Even some of their earliest coasters such as Rebel Yell and Loch Ness Monster purposely competed against each other to draw in the crowds. Rebel Yell opened in 1975 and only 3 years later saw the addition of Loch Ness Monster. This friendly rivalry in the early days of the parks was clearly noticed and even celebrated, with the parks constantly adding huge additions to please the general public. However, in the entire history of these parks, there was something called the Busch Gardens and Kings Dominion balance, which basically meant that both parks hardly ever added a major coaster in the same year as each other. In fact, in the entire history of the parks, this had only ever happened 2 times, and that's remarkable, considering the fact that both of these parks together have had over 32 coasters. These parks had a balance, and it was working perfectly. Kings Dominion was largely a park for thrill rides, and BGW was a park geared towards theming. Even though it was quote-unquote a war between the parks, things were going very well, with each park thriving in their own space. However, after 2010, things would slowly begin to change. 2010 is known for many things. However, coaster enthusiasts remember it as the year that Intimidator 305 opened to the public. Like I mentioned earlier, Kings Dominion was a park for thrill seekers, which meant that the park thrived when they got the latest and greatest thrill rides. This resulted in the park ultimately receiving a few prototypes throughout its lifespan, such as Volcano the Blast Coaster and Hypersonic XLC. However, this wasn't always a huge problem, because Katie's fanbase loved the newest thrilling coasters regardless if it was a prototype or not. Kings Dominion saw it profitable to invest in the latest, most intense coasters. This is why in 2010, the most intense coaster in the entire world opened at the park. Yes, if you're watching this video, you probably already know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the original Intimidator 305. Not the one we ride today, but the I-305 before the first turn got reprofiled. Kings Dominion knew that its clientele loved intense, thrilling coasters, so in 2010 they made the ginormous investment of $25 million for the world's most intense coaster. They obviously didn't know that it would make people black out on the first turn, but they loved the idea of the most exciting coaster possible. They wanted to compete with Busch Gardens Williamsburg, who just added Griffon 3 years prior, and Griffon was incredibly well received. Their initial idea was that investing in such a huge coaster, they would receive a huge uptick in attendance, sales, and revenue not just in 2010, but in many years to come. However, that didn't happen. In fact, I-305 was just too intense for the general public, and the park even had to reprofile the first turn because people were graying out on the ride too much. Obviously, many park goers didn't love Intimidator 305. They would ride it once, but it still wasn't a coaster that was extremely re-rideable. Even though the ride was and still is praised by many enthusiasts, including myself, the park's $25 million investment kind of failed. It didn't do what it was intended to do. The coaster was not designed to only please coaster enthusiasts. No coaster is. It was designed to please coaster enthusiasts and the general public. For $25 million, the general public was supposed to love the ride, such as another Intamin coaster, Millennium Force. Up until this point, Cedar Fair was giving a lot of priority to Kings Dominion in the Cedar Fair chain, trying to make it a mini Cedar Point. However, after the financial disaster, which was I-305, this changed. After 2010, Kings Dominion was put in a gridlock. They were no longer receiving the same amount of investment as the years before, but they were still expected to compete with Busch Gardens Williamsburg. It would eventually take 8 years for Kings Dominion to receive another coaster, with the addition of Twisted Timbers, a fantastic RMC. Unfortunately, it would take the removal of 3 coasters and 2 flat rides to get to this point though, including one of the best rides in the park, Volcano the Blast Coaster. Meanwhile, Busch Gardens Williamsburg came for the kill, adding 3 coasters in the time that Kings Dominion took to add 1. Busch Gardens was in a steady rise, as Kings Dominion was slowly starting to slip. At this point, you can say that Busch Gardens Williamsburg was winning the Virginia Coaster War. Or were they? Maybe they weren't actually winning the Virginia Coaster War because they had already won. Yes, you heard me right. Busch Gardens Williamsburg had won the Virginia Coaster War. Now, before you start thinking I'm crazy, let me explain, because this could possibly blow your mind. In order to explain what I mean, we need to look at Kings Dominion's most recent coaster. And no, I'm not talking about Twisted Timbers yet. What I'm actually referring to is that green thing still in the parking lot. Yup, I'm referring to the 4D free spin for 2022. If you haven't heard, Kings Dominion is getting a 4D free spin next year to replace the Crypt. And even though the ride technically isn't confirmed yet, I mean, it's sitting right there, everyone knows it. The addition of the 4D free spin is extremely strange. If you're familiar with the coaster industry, when you hear the words 4D free spin, you'll immediately think of Six Flags. You know, that chain that has the Joker? No, not that one. Or that one, or that one, or that, but those. Yeah, those. Basically, this ride is the literal definition of Six Flags, with them adding it to many of their parks. In fact, more parks have 4D free spins than those that do not. But unfortunately, there was one park that really needs a 4D free spin that doesn't have it, and it looks like they won't get it. I'm talking about Six Flags America, and this is where things start to get strange. If you're not too familiar with Six Flags America, it's pretty much in the bottom tier of the Six Flags chain. They really need a new coaster badly. Their last coaster they got was a relocated Wild Mouse, so a 4D free spin would be greatly appreciated here. But Kings Dominion decided to one-up Six Flags America and add the 4D free spin before they could, effectively preventing Six Flags America from getting one. Maybe Kings Dominion is no longer focusing on competing with BGW, but Six Flags America. Both of these parks are relatively close to each other, with their fan base being both in the Washington, D.C. area. Instead of being Virginia's best theme park, Kings Dominion can be the best park in the Northern Virginia, D.C. area, because there are many people who live equal distances from both of these parks. Don't believe me? Just look at Twisted Timbers. Many people thought that Twisted Timbers was meant to help Kings Dominion compete with BGW, and it was. But there was a secondary goal in mind. It stopped Six Flags America from getting the only coaster that they could afford besides an RMC Raptor and a free spin. That is an RMC IBox. Six Flags America has Roar, which, as many of you already know, it's the perfect candidate for the RMC IBox treatment. In fact, the Joker, not that one, was a clone of Roar before it became an RMC. It's been widely speculated that Six Flags America would eventually do this, but now with Twisted Timbers, it becomes slightly harder for them to get an RMC IBox. So effectively, what Busch Gardens did is knock down Kings Dominion a level in competition. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing for Kings Dominion. Kings Dominion could very well thrive in this scenario. But Busch Gardens isn't out of the woods yet, because even though Kings Dominion seemed to back down, another competitor stepped up. And that is Carowinds. Believe it or not, Busch Gardens' biggest competitor is Carowinds. In fact, their geographical area is also very similar to Busch Gardens. People from Virginia drive down to Carowinds, and people from North Carolina drive up to Busch Gardens. So Busch Gardens is still receiving the same amount of competition, if not much more. So that's it. It looks like the Virginia Coaster War has come to an end, with Busch Gardens Williamsburg taking the spot as the best theme park in Virginia, leaving Kings Dominion to take on Six Flags America with the strategic additions that will change the future of these two parks. However, Busch Gardens Williamsburg and Kings Dominion are both fantastic parks, and if you haven't been yet, do yourself a favor and go. Trust me, you will not regret it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see content just like this every week, and comment below your thoughts on this video. What do you think the future is going to be like for Kings Dominion and Busch Gardens and even Six Flags America? This is the Kosher Josh, signing out.